You're listening to a DM podcast.
Welcome to Over the Back Fence. I'm Di Edwards.
I'm Nicola Dale, and we're buddies of nearly 4 decades. And yes, we actually do happen to share a back fence.
We do. We love parties, people, inspirational stories, and honestly, making the most out of life.
So join us as we open our hearts, share our stories, and hear from some of the most inspirational people in the world, and have a laugh along the way.
Yeah.
Enjoy. Hey, Didi, how you feeling? How did you sleep last night?
Last night I slept well. The night before there'd been a few things happening in the neighbourhood and I didn't sleep well at all.
Oh.
But there's nothing worse than being spooked.
Being
Nicola.
spooked, I know. You know what's funny? I heard alarms too sort of going off, whether it was police sirens
Yes.
or things like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes
Because she's over the back fence.
yeah,
as
we
you know.
share a back fence,
Yeah.
everybody, like that. So sometimes, there, and if you're on your own there, I've got the security thing, and you can get a bit spooked out.
Yes.
But do you ever get spooked out of it, Didi?
Well, it's a funny thing because we're about to interview somebody that's her whole world is crime.
Crime! Woo! Well, I tell you what, we are absolutely thrilled to introduce Vikki Petraitis, who's a true crime writer, presenter, podcaster of Casefiles, record-breaking Casefiles #1 on the Apple charts, and we'd absolutely the Frankston Murders. That's certainly sort of kind of close to my home when I was a Melbourne girl myself. Author of many crime books, and her latest being The Unbelieved, which I loved. So welcome, Vikki, to the back fence.
Welcome, Vikki.
Thank you for having me over your back fence. I'm so honoured.
It's a funny thing, just reading about Vikki. It's like, A, being a woman, but B, to have such a remarkable interest in something such as crime writing. For years, Nicola and I have been going out to the Mornington Peninsula doing different things, walks and whatever. And as we drive through Frankston, Nicola being a Melbourne girl, she would go, oh, the memories of things that happened in Frankston. It's like a chill ran through her spine. Isn't it true? And I'd always go, oh, my God, every time we get here.
Yes, I know, because she was saying Frankston. I said, it's actually now, and then look, it's the most lovely suburb.
Yeah.
It's gone way up in real estate. And
Yeah.
I tell you what, I'd like a piece of a pie in Frankston. But it really is. It's been one of those things. And then, Vikki, you also did. So tell everybody, and there's so much we want to hear about you, but, especially the Frankston Murders and what you've done a book, you've done the podcast. And it's just, to me, it always has that connotation. Frankston, I still get a little bit spooked from it. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about, your relationship and what's happened there?
I still get a little bit spooked by it as well, to be honest. And I lived in Seaford and I was writing a crime book and I was on patrol with the Frankston police and I was at the scene for the final murder. And I remember sitting in the back of the police car. Of course, I didn't get out, but I remember sitting in the back of the police car and just thinking, I've got to write this book. I've got to write this book as a local. I was terrified like everybody else, and I need to write this book in a way that the families contribute and to see what he took. And that was really important to me. So that was, goodness me, 1993, a long time ago. And that was the night that I decided to write the book, was at the crime scene of Natalie Russell's murder.
And setting the scene for the listeners,
Yes,
there was many
international listeners.
He was
too.
a serial
killer.
murderer. Like, it was 3 murders, is that correct?
Yeah, so
That's acknowledged.
and this was in 7 weeks. So in middle of June in 1993, Elizabeth Stevens was taken from the bus stop in Langwarrin, and then a couple of weeks later, Debbie Freem, who I think was, the murder victim that touched everybody's heart because she had a newborn baby at home and she'd invited a friend around to meet the baby and gone up to get some milk at the milk bar and didn't come back.
12 days old.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Just
And for all our overseas listeners too, Frankston is a suburb just sort of outside of Melbourne, in Australia. And so continue on, Vikki.
And then the third victim was Natalie Russell, who was taken on her way home from school. And I remember getting to the police station to go on patrol, it wasn't because of the murders, it was just to write a story with the police. And this corridor of smokers, in the olden days everybody smoked and all the cops waiting outside, and they're going, another one's gone missing, like right under our noses. But to their credit, there was so many extra police in Frankston at the time that police were checking his car as he was killing Natalie Russell. And so when they found her body the next day, these two cops said, we actually were there in the afternoon checking the car.
So
and
close.
it's interesting, so much evidence prior to that the police didn't acknowledge, such as going into his neighbours' apartments and doing mad things.
It's one of the really hard things as a crime writer, and I guess we can all look at the wisdom of hindsight, but several of the people that he targeted before he became a murderer reported him and said, look, I think that person that broke into my house is my next door neighbour, Paul. And the police are like, yeah, you know. They didn't follow it up. Another neighbour had her cats killed. He had broken in and killed her cats and written in their blood, Donna, you're dead, on the walls, which would be terrifying. And they're saying, look, I think it might be Paul. And one of them was told, well, we just can't go knocking on the doors accusing people of things. And so this is the source of so much of my writing, is when women aren't believed, it makes the world unsafe for all women.
Yeah, so you know what? And that just seems to be a case. It happened so much of that time, and hopefully that things now are changing and you know, women are getting listed. We've got a voice, but especially back then, there was a lot of cases of, you know, women going to the police and, you know, a bit of a boys' club, a bit of misogyny.
You're imagining it.
Yeah, imagining it or sort of under the carpet until then. Wow, so you then wrote the book. And then tell us then, how did it come out with being Casefiles too? Tell us about your podcast, which is just huge globally.
Yeah, so I had Casefile got in touch with me in about 2017, and they wanted to do a podcast on my first book, The Phillip Island Murder. And so I'm like, yep, any publicity for that case always brings fresh information forward.
Right.
So I met with a researcher, and the episode came out, and then I was talking to the Casefile host, and he said to me, you should do a series on this. I'm like, I don't know how to make a podcast, but I've never let not knowing how to do something get in the way of doing it.
Oh, that's good. We like your attitude. Yes.
I think that as people, and I'm a teacher, like, so parallel to being a crime writer, I'm in the classroom all day, every day with kids. And I think that we say that to kids. Of course you don't know how to do something the first time you do it, but you've got to trust yourself as a learner to figure it out. And so I thought, well, I'm a good storyteller. I have a voice that's fairly calming because I'm a teacher, and you have to have that voice for kids. And I'm also a storyteller because I tell stories to kids, and they're a tough crowd, right? and I interview people, and I'd still kept in touch with a lot of the people from Phillip Island. So it was a matter of ringing them and saying, hey, would you be on my podcast? And then I just made an episode, and I sent it to him. And luckily my niece has a podcast studio, so that was really helpful. But I sent it to him, and he said to me much later, he said, I was waiting for you to ask how to do it, and then you just sent us an episode.
Wow, and there you go.
You take the bull by the horn.
Exactly, yes. And then
someone that writes crime would have to be
and tell us
strong.
What is the reason? How does it get? What is the fascination with crime? Like, you know, I can understand, you know, around the area, say with Phillip Island or Frankston, but it's a global thing that people are just nearly addicted to crime podcasts. What is it?
I have a theory, and my theory is that it's about safety. And I think when I do a talk, I have women come up and say, ever since you wrote the Frankston book, I always check the back seat before I hop in the car. So
Isn't incredible?
Isn't it though?
Really?
Right? So women will say never park next to a white van because in the podcast they're always the kidnappers.
Yes.
And I just kind of think
used to be wasn't the shaggin' wagon, was it? You know, like
Kathy Lett with the panel van.
Exactly. We had Kathy Lett on, and she was with the one with the curtains and the whole thing. If it's a rockin', don't come and knockin'. But this is this is a
maybe in those days we might have parked next to the white van. Yeah. After true crime podcasts, I think I think women are really vulnerable in the world, and we make up the bulk of the victims. And I think women listen to hear about how women are targeted and maybe how to avoid it, to read the signs, to read the behaviour. And so that's my feeling.
It's funny, you know, when Nick and I first talked about starting a podcast, I was so amazed how many girlfriends said, oh, yeah, I listen to podcasts. I listen to crime podcasts. And I didn't understand. I was like, You what? Like you want to be fearful, but it's that curiosity, isn't it? It's the
Yes.
unknown. And now that I've been listening to your podcast,
I know, you've got us hooked. Absolutely.
I literally am. I had to listen to all of the episodes of the Frankston Murders. It was remarkable. It draws you in because it's something you
and
don't
I guess
see in your
it's a
life,
universal thing
hopefully.
too, you know, that there are psychopaths and serial killers throughout the world, sadly. But you get, you know, between their mindset a bit, you know, like, and, you know, what makes, you know, like, can you tell us sort of what makes sort of a serial killer? What are the things in their mind?
Look, I think it's a perfect storm, really. With Denya, he had been dropped on his head as a baby. Did that cause
Right,
it?
so this
I
is
don't
the
know.
serial
He
Paul Denya.
he accused his brother in his confession of sexually assaulting him. The brother denied it, don't they all?
Yeah.
We don't know whether it was that. He says that he wanted to kill since he was 14. And I think that we just have these rare, you know, like a bell curve, right? So they're at the end of the bell curve, and we're just going to get this distribution right up there, that end, and we're going to get someone who does this, and we are unprepared as a society to cope when someone is like that.
Yeah, that's
Let alone
true.
the parents.
That's true, and it's, I
of a
guess now with
psychopath.
that's for the parents and for the police and people in charge now. You sort of hope that now there's a bit more acceptance in signs and
And
people are
education
getting,
around
and
it,
education into it. But no, it's just absolutely fascinating, though, isn't it?
What blows my mind is someone like Vikki to have this, and I have to almost call it like an obsession, because how many books have you written? How many crime books have you written?
Oh, they're behind me on the shelf. Like 18 or something.
Like that's
18,
Oh, just
wow.
throwaway
Yes,
line.
exactly. Just say 18, yes.
But it's like, where do I say obsession because it's a beautiful obsession, though, because something you're obviously passionate about. Where do you think that comes from?
I don't use obsession. I use addiction.
Addiction.
Yes, okay, addiction. There you go.
Whoa.
It can be addicted to love,
That's
addicted to
huge.
crime
Yeah,
and
yeah.
writing.
So tell us
Yes,
about
shoot.
that.
I think that when you're a writer, it's a compelling desire to write. But I also think it's the way that you process the world. So if I have any kind of trauma, or if I have something sad happen, or bullying at work when I was a teacher, I just made its way into a scene, right? So I just think we process our world through the written word. And so I can't not do it. And I don't drink. So I think that's... When I was a teacher, right, here's another theory. So a lot of teachers, they get to wine o'clock because they need to. But, you know, every night I'm fully sober at my laptop and just creating. And this is how my world worked. I would work during the day and I would write at night and on the weekends, and I can't not do it.
Wow. And how do you like now the power of podcasts, the power of voice? Because as you're saying, you do have a beautiful, calming voice. It is. It's a beautiful, calming voice.
She's talking about these murders. And
yes.
Okay.
How do you find that platform than say writing?
Here's the thing. When you write a book, and if you sell 10,000, it's a bestseller in Australia, and that's a really good amount. And my books have sold bigger amounts than that. But when I made my podcast, I think we got like a couple of 100,000 downloads in the first week.
Wow.
And then it's 1 million in about a month. And I think Frankston, it was 1 million in 2 weeks. These kind of numbers mean that my voice and my story is around the world. And when you're doing it, we're not doing it for fame, are we, girls?
No.
That's not our motivator, right? So we're doing it for voice. And when you can say, I can tell a story and it can go around the world, then that's a really awesome thing. So when we did Frankston, we dropped it about a week before Paul Denya was able to apply for parole and get a hearing.
And when was that? What year?
Last year.
Okay,
Last
so
year.
this is bringing it up to know.
Yeah, so Paul Denya, when he was convicted, he got a life sentence never to be released. He appealed and got a 30-year minimum. And that 30 years was up last year. So we had planned...
When you say we, who's we?
So me and Casefile originally, we wanted
That's
to
the podcast
say
platform.
he's going to apply. Let's do a podcast. So I've been making it for the whole year.
Okay.
But then I teamed up with Natalie Russell, the third victim. She was going out with a 19-year-old young man at the time that she was murdered, who now is in Parliament, and which is great. And so he was agitating from within. And then a friend of Natalie's best friend, Karen, she and Dave and I, we did media, we looked at lobbyists, and we just did everything that we could to put that story on the front page of the newspapers to get the law changed. And so I sat in Parliament in November last year watching a bipartisan vote to keep Daniel in prison forever. And that's pretty cool.
Well,
Congratulations
yeah.
to,
That's
and
amazing.
that was successful, and laws have been changed. So I was going to talk about the power of your passion of doing this, and the power of podcast and people all behind you, that laws have been changed. And I tell you what, I feel a bit safer. Like if I was going to Frankston, and Paul
we'll
was
do
out,
it again.
honestly, so that's congratulations on that, Vikki.
She went
truly.
beyond writing crime books.
And I guess it's been, we all know, like a lot in Australia too, with
Personal
the teacher's
conviction.
pet was another example. I know that wasn't yours, Vikki, but still that was another huge thing of conviction, and that was through the power of podcasts, I guess, Hedley Thomas,
definitely.
wasn't it?
And here's the thing, right? If you make a podcast on something, so I know cases, this happens all the time. People will say, we're trying to get the police to look into it, or we think that there's been a miscarriage of justice, and they can't get anywhere. You put a podcast out, particularly with someone like Casefile, who's automatically, as you said, tops the charts everywhere, that if you put a podcast out under their platform, you have an international voice and you have sway. And the police might look into something again, or you might have new witnesses come forward. And this is why we do it. We're not doing this for fun. We're doing this
we are.
to...
we love
have
it.
fun.
Yeah,
I know. Yours is a lot of fun.
We'd have fun in a gutter though. Vikki.
Exactly, that's right. Fun. But like you, we do want to make a difference, and ours is sort of, I guess,
Without
like
a doubt.
community based. And for people here listening to this one too, it's just a really great platform. Also hearing about with crime, and also feeling a little bit safer. And we want to get a few tips from you on that.
Yeah,
on how women do feel safer. But all credit to you. It's amazing the change.
But I think your podcast is important in the fact that you give people a voice, and that you allow people to say, well, I came from a point of here, and then I did these things to get here. And then that, you've got to see it to be it. And I think people can say, well, that's not hard. Maybe I could do that. So you are opening the doors for people.
Thank you.
Very true.
I think
very
that's
true.
nice. I think it's
I
just sort
agree.
of for us even starting the podcast at this age and having, people younger, older, that literally you can do anything really at any stage and age of your life. And we just feel like we're starting out, So aren't we?
It's a new beginning in
It's
the
a new
60s,
beginning.
Vikki. Vikki, I have to ask you, 80-odd books and all around crime and God knows serial killers and whatnot, particularly with Paul Dope. I know I'm going back to the Frankston murders. Apparently he wrote to you from jail. My question to you is, how many times have you been A, frightened, or B, possibly had a death threat over the years?
Get spooked.
I think that you have to be a little bit fearless to do this kind of work. And I think that you have to put that aside. And I think really, I started when I was really young, so I was in my 20s. And I think maybe I decided that the story was king. So everything that I did had to serve the story. So if I had to go in and have an interview with a family who had lost, a child or whatever, that even though that was difficult, it's like I'm saying to myself, it's all about the story, it's all about the story. And if I remain calm, then I get to get the best interview to tell their story. And I think that, that becomes your habit. And so for me, it is about the story. So I haven't really been scared.
Wow.
You are incredible
That
because you
blows my
are
mind.
super calm. And I've always been a scaredy cat at night time, a bit too, like that. And
Nick, it's
I
so
know I
cute.
used to run, even as a kid, I used to run in the middle of the road, the light said, just in case the bad man used to come and get me. I must have read or something with too many spooky books or something. Now I've got my dog with me, and I've got to say too, for listeners, you've got to read to The Unbelieved. And if you can tell us a little bit about that book, I loved it because the dog Waffles in it. Was that a book, was that based on true characters, or tell us
Oh,
about
definitely.
that?
Well,
So-
it was fiction for starters.
Yes, fiction.
That's
but
new for you.
Facts and fiction
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, so in, I think, about 2017, I decided to do a PhD in creative writing. And a lot of writers are doing PhDs because it's like a 100,000 word project, which that's what we work in. Most people would go, kill me now.
Yes.
But when you're a writer, that's what you do. And we all do very intensive research. So I thought, I really like the floppy hat that you get when you graduate. So I'm totally doing that. And I thought, if I'm going to do a PhD, I need to write something that's completely different to what I normally write. So true crime, you can do that pretty easily when you've done a lot of it. And I thought, I'm going to challenge myself to write fiction. And again, I didn't know how to do it, but I trusted myself as a storyteller, and I trusted that I can. I think one of my kids said, you do words good.
Oh,
Yes, I do.
It sums it up in a
words,
nutshell.
You
Yeah.
certainly do.
And I thought, well, I know how to tell a story. And what I decided to do with The Unbelieved was to take all of the things that had really gotten up my goat as a true crime author. And so women not being believed, women being let down by the legal system, in the sense that conviction rates are in the single digits for crimes against women and children, violence and crimes of sex. And I just thought, people don't know about this. Back in 2017, they didn't. I think they do now, a lot more now. But I wanted to cover that, and I wanted people to love the characters, but I also wanted them to feel angry at the end and go, what the hell? And we have this, in our society, we have this innocent until proven guilty. And if I hear that one more time, I'm going to scream.
Yeah.
Because I know it's a thing, thing in law, but the thing about it is, we saw it with Bruce Lerman. So if I had $1 for every person that went innocent until proven guilty, now all the true crime writers went, yeah, guilty. Statistically, sure. But the fact is that even when he went to court, he had a 94% chance of being found not guilty before he even walks in the door.
Yeah.
So that is not a system that works.
No.
And it certainly doesn't work for women. And the problem, of course, which is the unbelieved, at the heart of it is, when we don't believe women, we make the world unsafe for all women.
Nicola loved the book
you know,
Unbelieved,
it's-
didn't you? You loved that
I
book.
absolutely,
Yeah.
I loved it.
She
No,
kept talking
I did
about
it.
it.
I do my reading by audio, so I love it. So when I was walking, Fred, my cover dog, and I was listening to you, and I just loved the character, and it was funny. And I guess I knew that I was, going to be chatting to you, Vikki, and I kept on sort of thinking that the main character gave me an insight a little bit into you, into what you would think, and I was nearly like, go girl, like the injustice, whatever. But in it, and I'd like to hear, you do give some tips on women feeling, to try and feel safe, such as self-defence. What else would you say, Vikki?
I think women are getting much more suspicious now. And I think, and I still teach occasionally, I want to keep my registration because I love working with kids. And I love hearing young women, in secondary schools talk about how they're really up with the red flags. And if someone's boyfriend says, no, you have to wear a one piece when we all go to the pool, all of the girls are going, that's a red flag. He's not allowed to tell you what to wear.
Yeah.
I think young women are much more aware than what we ever were.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
Good.
we grew up in that, the puberty blues film, and then, the boys basically rule the world and the girls just run along behind. And that was certainly my experience of the 80s.
Yes.
But I hope girls aren't doing that now.
No. I think that's certainly changed, which is a great
More
thing.
independent and strong, without a doubt.
But I
Yeah.
guess
Awareness.
it's an awareness, and I think also the thing is being believed and speaking up and being listened to, and going to your local police station or ringing up to, and then you're saying something, and instead of being dismissed, then action is taken.
I was fascinated how many books you wrote encompassing police, like whether it's Dog Squad, Cops, Once a Copper, Crime Scene. The one that got me, though, and Nicola, you'll remember this woman, she's a lawyer, Lawyer X. Nicola was her name. Is it Gobo?
Gobbo,
Yeah.
Oh, right, yes.
I was always fascinated by the story behind her and how this all came about. And you wrote it with Paul Dale, and it's Cops, Drugs and Me. That particular book, can you tell us a little bit about that? And also I'd like to know what's happening now with Lawyer X.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I didn't ever write a lot about gangland, and I didn't ever write a lot about, because I think there were a lot of male authors writing about that. And my theory about that is that there's a lot of bang 'em up, shoot 'em up, sleep with women kind of stories. And as a crime writer, I'm really interested in the human condition and resilience, and so I'm never going to be drawn to how big is your gun. So there was a lot of, the Underbelly series, and
Yes, I was a bit obsessed by that, to be honest.
Yeah. But it wasn't anything that I was ever drawn to write about. My things were very much people-centred, not... Because I also think the motivation in Gangland is really clear. I want money.
Right.
Yes.
No, I hear you.
Full stop.
I'm really interested in much more subtle kind of things. But Paul Dale came to me, and he was a Victoria police officer who had been accused of a whole bunch of things, including killing Terry Hodson, who was an informer, and caught up with, Carl Williams and all this sort of stuff. And so I'd never heard of him, and I started to research him. And he'd been charged with a whole bunch of things, and I, the more I looked into it, some of the strategies that had been used against him, I thought, nah, this isn't right. So the big one was offering Carl Williams $1 million award to give a statement against Paul Dale, and let him ask for a shorter sentence. And it's like, oh, you can't do that. That's in anyone's language. And I wasn't concerned about what Paul did or didn't. To me, the process was appalling. And so Paul, what I liked about Paul was he didn't try and tell me what to write. He just dumped boxes and boxes and boxes of documents and goes, you read it yourself and you decide, you be the judge. And I did, and I was really worried about the use of Nicola Gobbo as an informer, which we had talked about. And then a couple of years later, it broke that she was an informer. So she's a defence barrister informing on her clients.
Which is
amazing, isn't it?
It's
it's incredible story. And this story's gone global too, hasn't it, Vikki?
Huge.
It's a huge...
Yeah. And we had a Royal Commission. What was really interesting is Rachel Brown who did the Trace podcast, which I love that.
Yes.
And her, I think, maybe Trace 2 was on Lawyer X, and she got an interview with Nicola Gobbo, who was in hiding, and Rachel made the point in her podcast that she said a whole lot of senior police, including Simon Overland, who at some point was the Chief Commissioner, were involved in this and was supporting the use of a barrister as an informer, and Nicola Gobbo was the only one really that got any consequences from it.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
she was
Wow.
ousted. She had to leave the country, and I don't think any charges have been laid. I think one person has gotten out of jail. He was appealed and was released because I think Nicola had passed on information. But it's just a decision that's made by a lot of men with one woman, and who suffers in the end? It's not the men.
Wow.
Where is she
Wow.
now, as a matter of interest?
We don't know.
She's
Really?
in hiding. That's the
So
question.
this is how many
Hey, that's
years
a
this
new-
poor woman...
That's another
Yeah.
podcast
She's
series
still in
of where is
hiding.
she now. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty awful.
So that's even with you, with all your contacts and all the people no one has any idea. Has she got a child?
I think she had a couple of kids.
Yeah,
and
see
when,
how difficult that would
I
be.
think, now stretching my memory back a couple of years here, but I think Rachel Brown might have flown overseas to interview her.
Right.
And so Nicola was pretty much a refugee from
Yeah.
out of her own country.
Right. It's a fascinating book for those that are listening.
certainly
Cops, Drugs and Me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. And I'd love our listeners too to let us know what they like, because it really is one of the things that people just get caught up and love it, whether it is in a missing person or something. But I do like it that that things are changing. And are they really changing, Vikki, for the best, or is it just sort of slowly?
I think what we've got is in the 80s and 90s there was a sense of, when we were younger, and there was a sense that women could do anything and you could have everything. And what I think now, what I'm seeing, and this is why I wanted to write The Unbelieved and have the themes in it that I had, is what we're seeing this subtle and not so subtle pushback against women's rights. So once women get a certain way forward, we have this brick wall. And part of what was in The Unbelieved was the fact that I was hearing from women of my age, I'm 58, and hearing from women that they're being overlooked for promotion, or being at work and having, like I was at a school where you get your equal opportunities report at the end of the year, and it said 40% of the staff are men and they get 60% of the promotions. It's like, the maths doesn't work. And then you've got more men in charge that are interviewing the new men for positions who are seeing in these younger men, oh, you remind me a bit of me. And it you see it happen. And it's so disturbing. But you hear men, oh, but they're appointed on merit. Like, through whose eyes? Through your eyes, through your man eyes.
So that's interesting. What you're saying is then that the changes aren't, because it's funny, we had another columnist on, we were going, has a pendulum swung too far with now women getting heard and their voices there, that sometimes the position of a male is like, where do I stand? But I guess...
Yeah, because there's transition taking place for a lot of men. They're brought up in a different world.
Different thing there. But
understandable.
But I guess, still the safety and something there that still hasn't really changed. Or in your book, The Unbelieved too, is like, and it's still a thing happening if, young girls getting their drinks are spiked. And those things there, they're just still going on.
Yeah. And I think what I wanted to do with The Unbelieved was to show that a character like Antigone, the police protagonist in it, that not only is she struggling to do her job, like she's trying to do her job, but she's also struggling against this misogyny. And I was able to kind of take golden kernels of awful language from men that I worked with. Because as a writer, this is what, you've got to be careful what you say in front of writers, because part of me might be horrified to hear something that was so mean or bullying or whatever, but my writer brain is going, I'm totally stealing that. That's coming out in a scene.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I'd love to dive into your brain for a minute. It'd be incredible, truly.
Yeah.
Be careful of going anywhere near it, because you can end up as a character.
Yeah, because you really are. I mean, the tools that you've learnt too, it's not only, you're a teacher, you're a writer, you're a podcaster. It must be like you're a shrink, you're a psychiatrist, you're a psychologist, like really getting to know. And I found that in that book, The Unbelieved too. What really got me too is just the way you sort of can sum up and really sum and sort of like, don't bullshit a bullshitter. You could basically see through people and really what makes them tick, or when they're telling porky pies.
That's what you're looking for, though, isn't it? When you're having an interaction, maybe that's just my brain again, but you are looking for not just what they're saying, but why are they saying it, and why do they need to say it, and why do they need to be heard above other people, or why? Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to be this observer. But at the same time, I'm not that observant. I'm sure if I was a witness in a case or something, I'd go, no, I didn't really notice. But maybe I'm too busy noticing other stuff.
And what about with prisons and things too? Because that's one show I used to like, is Prisoner. I was really fascinated with that. I love that, and it was interesting with Paul Denyer as well too. Sort of listening to his sort of experiences sort of through your podcast as well, of how birds of a feather he would hang out with other the other murderers, people there who'd sort of like killed their own children and things like that. And you go, wow, what? Then he went transgender, and the manipulation to maybe sway that people thought he was maybe, know him for turning to be a woman instead of thinking about he's a serial killer.
And then he writes a letter to Vikki.
You.
So tell me, I'm going to bring it back around.
That's true, yeah.
Tell me about that letter that you received from this serial killer directly to you. I want to know, firstly, you were saying, basically you're strong, you can deal with this, but what was your immediate reaction to receiving a letter from a jail from someone of that calibre?
The reason why I had written to him is that every time we put a new version of the book out, I will get asked in interviews, did you try and contact him? And as a writer, you have to be able to say yes, but I didn't hear back. And so it was to my great surprise that I did hear back. I have a post office box. I don't ever give my address out.
Smart.
Some pen pals that have written to him in jail have made that mistake, that when his parole hearing was coming up, thinking, holy moly, he knows where I live. And it's like, don't give your name, don't give your address out. And so I did get a bit of a surprise when he wrote back. But my first reaction to the letter was, if anyone wants to know what a psychopath is, it's right here. The letter was very polite. But he said to me, I don't want to help with your book because I intend writing my own true and unbiased account of the crimes, which are still upsetting to many, including me, which I trust will be sensitive to all concerned.
Wow, that is a true insight, isn't it?
And so, what did you think? Like when you read that, what's thoughts running through your mind?
I'm like, wow, psychopath. He doesn't understand what he did. He doesn't understand what he took, and he doesn't understand that he cannot write anything that is going to be sensitive to Natalie's mum or Debbie's son, who is now a 31-year-old. He's not writing anything that they will ever even read. But he doesn't know that because he's a psychopath. He doesn't. That's the part of his brain chemistry that's missing, is his ability to understand what he's done. He doesn't understand. But, of course, that makes him dangerous, because if you don't understand what you've done, like, what? I said I was sorry.
And I believe he wrote poems too.
right.
I don't know, what is it sometimes that women, and maybe it's the other way with men, write to people in prison? You know, and sometimes they fall,
they
sort
fall
of
in
like
love.
and
They
then
marry
they sort
them.
of form a relationship. Is it something missing inside them, or why do
it's a good
people
question.
do that, Vikki?
Look, I think it was interesting because the woman that I interviewed for the podcast who had written to him, she wrote because at that stage Paul was Paula and she had a family member that was transgender, and she felt for him and wanted to make that connection. And I think they might do it for the good reasons, but you do not know who you are dealing with. And when you're dealing with a psychopath, as she found out to her horror, you're dealing with a psychopath, and you can forget that when they're writing lovely letters. Hi, honey, how you going? But that's not who you're dealing with.
No.
Fascinating, obviously, for you to do the research for these particular books. How many of the family that have been shattered and left with a residue from a family member, friend who have passed away as a consequence of someone like a Paul, Daniel? I mean, how difficult is that for you to be interviewing those sort of people, family or friends?
Do you know what?
question.
It's counterintuitive, right? Because you think that that's the worst part of my job. And in fact, it is the best and most joyous part of my job, because when I come along and I sit with a family member, and often now they will have approached me, all they want to do is talk about their lost one when they're alive. They don't want them to be defined by that last 10 minutes of their life as a victim, and they want to have that conversation. And once time has passed, it becomes a really difficult conversation to have normally. So if someone says, have you got kids? And you say, I've got a daughter who's murdered, and that's, a bit of a conversation stopper. But when someone comes along and basically goes, tell me all about them, it's beautiful.
Wow.
And it's not
Fill out the
sad.
space.
I love
Empathy.
that. That's a beautiful thing, how you approach that, Vikki, and really getting to know them and getting the joy that instead of it being sort of like a thing there that with the whole time with the tissues that's beautiful.
I think it's the latest Jay Shetty I heard just recently. He was talking about grief. So
I
go
love
share
that
it.
one. Yes,
and he
yeah.
said someone told him once it's like a big heavy stone you put in your
I
pocket.
love that. Yes, yeah.
And over time, the stone gets lighter. It's not so weighty in your pocket, but you always know it's there. The stone is always there forevermore. It's just not as heavy. And I thought that was actually quite beautiful.
Yes, I think,
like it's
and
a way to
I can see
look
that.
at grief.
I can see how that relates sort of back to this too. That even when the parents or when they talk about their loved ones, I mean the pain and whatever is always going to be there. But how
Forever.
beautiful that they
It
can share
softens,
nice stories about them, and you're interested in about their life. And
You held the
and,
space though, Vikki.
And just
that's
another
the
before we
difference.
sort of wrap it up too, is it mainly, are there women serial killers out there? We hear sometimes, and I think it was with ones murdering babies and things, but are there serial women that go out chasing men?
There's serial women, but
know,
serial
yeah.
killer. Yeah.
The stalkers.
Serial
But are there,
men.
or is it just statistically?
Look, I think there have been a couple historically. It's mainly men, but you do get the serial killers in terms of the medical ones, like those nurses. I think England has had a few, and America has certainly had a few that have. I think it's sort of tied up with that Munchausen syndrome by proxy, in that if you're a nurse and then there's a code blue or whatever a code is, that when there's a danger and that everybody comes flying and you're the hero and you jump in and they get addicted to that can be a thing. But I think in terms of what Paul Denyer was, in that they're selecting a victim and they're hunting them down and they're stalking, that really seems to be a guy thing.
Are you now putting your sort of mind to another case, Vikki, or is that sort of anything for you to share with us? Or?
Yeah, so I'm doing the sequel to The Unbelief, so that's due in November.
Wow,
And
that's
How
great.
good's that?
I'm excited about
Any
that.
movies in the
Truly,
making?
really, yes.
Any movie
I loved it.
potential?
Yes, but I'm not allowed to talk.
Hey!
Woohoo!
Isn't that interesting? Remember I
Is it-
said to you the other day?
Yes,
Because
it's that
Nicola's been
good.
so consumed by this book.
I have been.
I said, what if it'll turn into a movie?
I walked for hours and hours.
That's
It was
juicy.
really good. And at night time, when I would be spooked, but because I had my dog with me as well, I feel kind of protected and that way with the dog. But I
God,
loved
I think
it.
it'd be a great film.
Yeah, well,
Well, all right. Well, keep quiet.
Keep quiet.
Tell us more. No.
yeah, exactly. And also, congratulations too. I mean, number one on the charts. You're making a difference, and
Yeah. Honouring
beautiful,
your
calm
convictions.
voice. Yeah, you really are. So you
Proud
talk
of
about
you,
we love
Vikki.
having inspirational people, and you certainly are like a shining star of
Yeah,
that,
true,
Vikki.
good point.
Really, and changing the law too behind that. Like it's huge.
Because a lot of people go, oh, listening, it's about crime. But ultimately, with her own personal conviction, she followed through.
Yes,
And
yeah.
and we're talking particularly about when poor Daniel had that opportunity of parole. I mean, good on you for getting personally involved and following through, because a lot of us think about it but don't. What do you say? Words but not actions.
Yes, yeah.
So well done, Vikki. We're proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such
We sure are, So anyhow, we've got a couple of our
We
signature
do.
questions. Did you want to shoot doody-doody-do?
Absolutely doodly do. First one, Vikki, is if you had the opportunity of meeting your 20-year-old self and having a little old chat, is there any sort of advice you'd give her?
I have been thinking a lot about this
Ooh.
question.
She's written a book about it.
And my answer has to be I wouldn't. And I'll tell you why. Everything that we are today is because of what we've battled and fought and experienced, good or bad. And that grows us, that transforms us. And if I had have known, like I dive into things not knowing whether they're easy or hard, and I just do them. And I think if I was whispering in my 20-year-old self ear to, look, this is easier, or this is, look, would I have done it if I didn't think it was, I don't know. And I just think it might interfere with the space-time continuum. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I get
honestly,
your point.
I love
no
that
one's come
answer.
in on this angle. We love it.
Yeah, no,
It's a unique angle.
yeah.
But it's true. It is true.
We are the sum total of every hardship. There was a quote that I saw the other day that said, when you walk through the storm, you are changed, but that's what the storm is for.
Oh,
and I think
beautiful.
and I know this
Beautiful metaphor, I love it.
profoundly in crime, is that people experience the worst. My next podcast is the unthinkable. So we interview people that have experienced the unthinkable. But we're not saying you've had this bad experience, so how did it crush you? We ask, you've had this bad experience, how did it form you?
Oh, wow.
And when you hear these stories, our first interview subject was Louisa Hope from the Link Cafe siege. And we literally, all of us in the team, just sat listening to her, absolutely awestruck at her power and her generosity and her kindness. And this was strengthened by Lint. And I think that we have this natural assumption that, if something bad happens, it's bad luck. For me, when something bad happens, I'm like, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And I've learned that from all the people that I've interviewed, that having something bad happen isn't defining. It can be the fuel that you need to move forward. And that is the power. And this is why I wouldn't tell my 20-year-old self anything.
Incredible.
Bravo,
Very beautiful,
Vikki.
eh?
We say music to our ears. That is
the book you put
really-
me on to, Lee Sow's book?
Oh yes, yeah. With Any Ordinary Day.
Any
and
Ordinary
that sort of thing
Day.
from adversity.
Do you know the book,
Yeah.
Vikki?
Yeah, she
I'm just-
interviews Louisa.
That just was resonating with me, what
Exactly.
you were saying.
The worst things that can
like
happen.
I said, read it.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
loved it.
And then how you can, is it transformational growth?
Yes.
From that.
Very
It's just-
powerful.
yeah, that I really thank you for sharing that, because that
Yes.
sort of like really is so important, because things do happen and you don't think of the unthinkable. Anything worse can happen.
Yeah.
And but still, you are the person that you are, and there still can be some sort of like
Some
some
gifts
growth
in
and
it.
Gifts in it. So
Hard to believe.
Wowza.
So the
look,
next
if you
one.
could share a back fence, Vikki, with
Mm-hmm.
anybody on planet Earth, who would it be and why?
I have thought about this too, because again,
There
I
you
couldn't.
go. That brain's
Yay.
been going full power.
I would like a crime fighter pal. So I would like someone that we could have a cup of tea over the back fence and go, oh, I've noticed that neighbour. I think he's doing something suspicious.
I love
I
this.
want you to be our neighbour.
This is
don't you?
great.
Oh, we want you as our
I
neighbour.
know, right?
Wow.
So
What's
good.
really happening in the street?
With
It would have to
binoculars.
be Miss Marple or something
I was
like that.
thinking, Agatha Christie, this is so good.
Someone that we could go crime fighting together. That would be my absolute perfect neighbour, was someone who had that mentality that's going, I don't take that on face value. I want to go and dig a little
Oh, that
suspicious.
is brilliant.
It's so good.
That is
It's
so
just-
good.
and-
I think you should have a street party too. You know, you could really
Listen,
go, what's
it'll
really
be very
going
Mrs.
on?
Kravitz from Bewitched. Abner, remember her?
Well, Vikki, thank you so much for coming on, and all our listeners will be blown away by you. Case files,
Fabulous.
all your books. I believe
dynamic
we're going to
human.
put links on our show notes, so we really appreciate it. I've learnt so much, and so thank you so much, and everyone, thank you for listening.
Yay.
And DM us or give us little voice messages. I want to know, some of the stories that you might know or something. Just tell us, which
and
would
we'll
be
send
great.
it on to Vikki.
Well,
and
exactly.
She can
Any
sit
other
down the back fence
any other
with her
questions?
friend.
Yeah. So
Talk about
don't
it.
forget to follow, rate and review. It does make a difference. And now we always have stars, and we like the 5 stars, but Dottie does her own, and we've got Vikki from Casefile.
it's out of 5, right?
Yes.
So I think she's written 18, but 18 out of 5 we want.
Woohoo!
And look, someone did ask me this week, can't see where to rate. It's down the bottom, isn't it? Down the bottom?
Yeah,
You
there's
just scroll down.
Yep, on Apple you can do it
Yep.
that way. Or so it's
Can you rate on Spotify?
yes, you can. You can rate on them all.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But it's generally down the bottom of it, isn't
keep
it?
on scrolling down. You
Yeah.
put the stars there, and it'll comment, and off you go and
Yeah.
send. It does make a
So
difference.
there you
And
go.
the 3 dots to follow, share, and it makes a difference because one day you'd love some ratings anywhere near like Case Files, wouldn't we?
Oh,
Like,
hello.
hello.
Checking that woman, Vikki,
Exactly.
Good on you, Vikki.
Yeah,
Thanks for your
everyone,
time
thanks for
today.
coming on,
And
everyone,
look
for
forward to
listening.
being in your ears next Monday.
Ciao, ciao. Bye.